The sun had barely risen when Emily tied her apron, pushed open the glass door of the little roadside diner, and smiled at the familiar smell of fresh coffee and warm pancakes. Every morning felt almost the same, but there was one customer who made her day different. Before we begin, if you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story. Your support helps keep heartfelt stories alive. At exactly 6:30 every morning, the bell above the diner door rang. An elderly man wearing a faded brown coat and carrying an old wooden cane quietly walked to the same booth near the window. His name was Mr. Harrison. He always ordered the cheapest breakfast on the menu, 1 cup of black coffee and plain toast. He never complained, never asked for anything extra, and always thanked Emily with a gentle smile that somehow hid years of loneliness. Emily noticed little things about him. His hands trembled slightly when he lifted his coffee. His coat grew thinner as winter approached. Sometimes she quietly added an extra egg or a slice of bacon to his plate without charging him. When he protested, she simply laughed and said the cook had made too much food. It wasn't true, but Mr. Harrison accepted the kindness with grateful eyes that spoke louder than words. The other waitresses often teased Emily. "You're too kind," one of them said. "You'll never get rich feeding people for free." Emily only smiled. Maybe not. But everyone deserves to feel cared for. Weeks turned into months. Every morning they shared short conversations about life, family, old memories, and dreams. Mr. Harrison never spoke much about his past. Whenever Emily asked if he had children, he simply looked out the window and quietly replied, "Sometimes life becomes very quiet." One rainy Tuesday morning, Emily prepared his usual breakfast before he even arrived. But 6:30 came and went. Then 7 o'clock. His booth remained empty. She felt an uncomfortable knot in her stomach. For the next 3 mornings, Mr. Harrison never appeared. Emily found herself staring at the empty booth far more than she focused on her other customers. She even asked around the neighborhood, but nobody seemed to know where the old man had gone. On the 4th morning, just as she was pouring coffee, the diner door opened. 4 tall men dressed in black suits entered first, their serious expressions making the entire restaurant fall silent. Behind them walked 2 elegant lawyers carrying leather briefcases. Every customer turned to stare. The manager rushed over nervously, thinking something terrible had happened. Instead, one of the lawyers calmly asked, "Is there a waitress named Emily Carter working here?" Emily slowly raised her hand. "I'm Emily." The lawyer smiled warmly. "We've been looking for you." Confused, Emily stepped forward. "I'm afraid you've mistaken me for someone else." The lawyer gently shook his head. "No, Miss Carter. Mr. Harrison instructed us to find you immediately." Emily's heart skipped. Is he all right?" The lawyer paused respectfully. "I'm very sorry. Mr. Harrison passed away 3 days ago." The diner became completely silent. Emily covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. I never even got to say goodbye." The lawyer carefully opened his briefcase and removed a sealed envelope. "This letter is addressed to you." With shaking hands, Emily unfolded the handwritten note. "Dear Emily, if you're reading this, my journey has ended. For nearly a year, you treated me with more kindness than I received from many people I once called family. You never knew who I was, and that's exactly why I trusted your heart. You offered food when I was hungry, respect when I felt forgotten, and friendship when I was alone. Wealth cannot buy genuine kindness. Character can." Emily could barely continue reading through her tears. The lawyer quietly spoke. Mr. Harrison was the founder of one of the largest construction companies in the state. After retiring, he spent his final years living simply because he wanted to discover whether kindness still existed without money. Gasps spread across the diner. The lawyer handed Emily one final document. He has left you a significant inheritance, not because you served him breakfast, but because you reminded him that compassion still lives in this world. Emily stood speechless as every coworker who had laughed at her looked down in embarrassment. She wasn't crying because of the inheritance. She was crying because the lonely old man who had become part of her mornings was gone forever. Before leaving, the lawyer smiled. He said you gave him something priceless during his last year. Emily whispered softly, "What was that?" The lawyer answered, "A reason to wake up every morning." As the black cars disappeared down the street, Emily looked at the empty booth by the window. It would never be occupied again, yet it would always remind her that the smallest acts of kindness often leave the greatest legacy. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment telling us what act of kindness has stayed with you forever. And remember to like, share, and subscribe, because one small kindness today may become someone's greatest memory tomorrow. The funeral was held 2 days later beneath gray autumn skies. Emily stood quietly in the back, dressed in a simple black coat, unsure if she even belonged there. Around her were politicians, business executives, judges, and wealthy families whose expensive cars lined the cemetery entrance. She felt completely out of place. As the service ended, the same lawyer who had visited the diner approached her. "Mr. Harrison hoped you would come," he said gently. "There is one final meeting at his estate this afternoon. He specifically requested your presence." Emily hesitated. "I'm just a waitress." The lawyer smiled. To him, you were much more. A black luxury SUV carried her through iron gates to an enormous mansion overlooking a peaceful lake. The house looked like something from a movie, towering columns, perfectly trimmed gardens, and marble fountains. Yet despite its beauty, it felt strangely empty. Inside, nearly 20 people waited around a polished conference table. Most were elegantly dressed relatives Emily had never met. The moment she entered, curious eyes locked onto her. One woman whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "That's the waitress." A younger man scoffed. "Grandfather spent more time at that diner than with us." Emily lowered her eyes, wishing she could disappear. The head lawyer cleared his throat. "Before Mr. Harrison's will is finalized, he instructed us to play one last recording." The room fell silent as a large television screen flickered to life. Mr. Harrison appeared, smiling warmly from his favorite chair. "If you're watching this," he began, "then I suppose I've finally kept my last appointment." Several relatives smiled sadly. But his expression became serious. "For years I wondered whether people loved me, or simply loved my money. So after retiring, I changed my name, dressed like an ordinary pensioner, and visited places where nobody knew who I was." The room grew tense. "I met many people who ignored me. Some rushed me out of stores. Others treated me like I was invisible." He paused. "Then I met Emily." Emily felt every eye turn toward her. "She never asked what I owned. She never asked where I came from. She only asked whether I had eaten." Several family members shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Harrison continued. "My own relatives often canceled dinners because they were busy. Emily never missed a single morning." The silence became painfully heavy. Then came the sentence no one expected. "So I have decided that my greatest investment will not be in those who expected my fortune, but in those who earned my respect." Gasps echoed through the room. The lawyer opened another folder. "As directed by Mr. Harrison, Miss Emily Carter will become chair of the Harrison Foundation, which controls hundreds of millions of dollars dedicated to feeding the elderly, supporting struggling families, and providing scholarships for hardworking students." Emily nearly dropped into her chair. I can't do that." The lawyer looked at her kindly. "He believed you could." Immediately, angry voices filled the room. "This is ridiculous. She manipulated him. She's nobody." The oldest son slammed his fist onto the table. "My father barely knew her. The lawyer calmly raised another envelope. He anticipated those objections. He unfolded another handwritten note. If any member of my family claims Emily influenced me for money, remember this: she showed me kindness for 11 months before she learned my real name. Not once did she ask for anything in return. No one spoke. The truth left them defenseless. Emily stood slowly, tears filling her eyes. I don't want anyone's inheritance, she said honestly. I only wanted my friend back. Her words struck the room harder than any legal document. For the first time, several relatives looked ashamed. They realized they had spent years competing for Mr. Harrison's fortune while a young waitress had simply shared breakfast with a lonely old man. As Emily walked toward the mansion's front door, the lawyer stopped her. There's one more thing. He handed her a small wooden box. Inside lay Mr. Harrison's old coffee mug from the diner. A note rested beneath it. Never forget where real wealth begins. The weeks that followed changed Emily's life in ways she never imagined. News of the inheritance spread quickly, and reporters crowded outside the diner every morning. Television crews wanted interviews. Newspapers called her the waitress who inherited a fortune. But Emily refused to let fame define her. She continued working at the diner until a replacement could be hired, serving coffee with the same smile she had always worn. When customers asked why she hadn't quit, she simply replied, "This place reminded one lonely man that he mattered. I'll always be grateful for that." Soon, Emily stepped into her new role as chair of the Harrison Foundation. Instead of moving into the mansion, she converted part of it into a free community center where seniors could gather for meals, conversation, and activities. She remembered how empty Mr. Harrison's mornings had once been and promised herself that no elderly person should ever have to eat alone if she could help it. The first project she approved was called the Morning Table. Every day, volunteers delivered warm breakfasts to elderly people living by themselves and spent time talking with them. The program spread from one town to another, helping thousands who had quietly been forgotten. One afternoon, while reviewing applications for scholarships, Emily noticed a familiar name. David Harrison. It was Mr. Harrison's grandson, the same young man who had mocked her during the reading of the will. He stood nervously outside her office when she agreed to meet him. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. "I came to apologize." Emily listened without interrupting. He looked down at the floor. "I spent years thinking Grandpa cared more about money than family. The truth is, we cared more about his money than we cared about him." His voice broke. "I can't change the past." Emily gently handed him a cup of coffee. "No," she said softly. "But you can change tomorrow." David began volunteering with the foundation every weekend. At first, people questioned his motives. But month after month, he showed up, serving meals, visiting nursing homes, and repairing houses for elderly residents. Slowly, people saw that he truly wanted to honor his grandfather's memory. Nearly a year after Mr. Harrison's passing, the diner celebrated its anniversary. Emily organized a special breakfast for every senior citizen in town. The little restaurant was filled with laughter, music, and conversations that lasted for hours. Near the entrance stood a bronze plaque with Mr. Harrison's favorite words engraved beneath a simple image of a coffee cup: "Kindness is the only wealth that grows when you give it away." As the event ended, an elderly woman approached Emily with tears in her eyes. "My husband passed away last year," she whispered. "I hadn't spoken to anyone over breakfast in months. Today was the first time I've laughed since he died." Emily hugged her tightly. At that moment, she realized Mr. Harrison's greatest gift had never been the inheritance. It had been the lesson that every person longs to be seen, valued, and remembered. That evening, Emily walked to the booth by the window where Mr. Harrison had sat every morning. She placed his old coffee mug on the table and smiled through quiet tears. "Good morning, my friend," she whispered, even though the sun was setting. For just a moment, the booth no longer felt empty. It felt full of memories. And somehow, that was enough. If this story warmed your heart, leave a comment with one act of kindness you'll do for someone this week. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes a simple cup of coffee and a caring heart can change lives forever.